My daughter's response to her mother's death was a single chilling sentence about her husband's birthday party. She had no idea that sentence just cost her a $5 million inheritance and that her real punishment was about to be delivered in front of all her important friends. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and please like and subscribe if you believe that respect for family is more important than any party. The silence in our home was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothered every sound, every memory. For 50 years, this house in the Atlanta suburbs had been filled with the sound of my wife, Lena. Her laughter from the kitchen, the soft murmur of the television as she watched her historical dramas, the sound of her humming as she tended to her garden. Now there was nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own broken heart. I sat in the armchair she had always claimed as hers, the worn floral fabric still holding the faint scent of her lavender perfume. The weight of my 71 years felt heavier than ever before. My hand trembled as I picked up my phone. Her face smiled back at me from the screen, a picture from our last anniversary. It took every ounce of my strength to navigate to my contacts and press the call button next to my daughter's name. Chloe, our only child, our pride and joy. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Chloe, I said, my voice cracking on her name. It's about your mother. She's gone. The line was quiet for a moment. I could hear the faint sound of music in the background, something upbeat and cheerful that felt like a slap in the face. Then a sigh. Not a gasp of shock, not a sob of pain. A sigh of inconvenience. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry to hear that. She'd been suffering for a while, hadn't she? Her words were a perfectly rehearsed script of sympathy, but her voice was hollow, distant, like a stranger reading a condolence card. She suffered because she missed her daughter, I thought, but I didn't say it. My grief was too raw, too sacred to be thrown into an argument. The funeral will be this Saturday, I managed to say, at the church on Elm Street. You know the one. Another pause. This one was longer, filled with a tension I could feel through the phone. Saturday, she repeated. The detached sympathy in her voice vanished, replaced by a strange, almost cheerful anxiety. Oh, Dad, you can't be serious. Can you move it to another day? I was speechless. Move it. Move the final farewell to the woman who gave you life. Before I could find the words, she rushed on, her voice now a waterfall of frantic excuses. You know this Saturday is Kevin's 42nd birthday. We've had this huge party planned for months at the country club. All of his partners, his most important clients, they're all going to be there. It's a huge networking opportunity for him. We can't just cancel it. I sank back into the chair, the phone feeling like a block of ice against my ear. A birthday party. My daughter was weighing her mother's funeral against her husband's birthday party, and the party was winning. I tried to reason with her. Chloe, this is your mother's funeral. People will fly in from all over the country. Her family, our friends. They expect to see you there. It's about paying respect. But it was like talking to a brick wall. Her focus was entirely on her husband and his career. This is important for Kevin's future dad. You understand, right? It's not that I don't care, but the logistics, it's just impossible to cancel now. The deposit is non-refundable. We've already paid for the caterer. Every word was a hammer blow to my heart. She was talking about deposits while I was talking about dignity. She was worried about caterers while I was trying to figure out how to bury my wife of 50 years. The woman who stayed up all night sewing Chloe's prom dress by hand, the woman who cashed in her own retirement bonds to help with the down payment on their first house. That woman. My Lena. The coldness in my chest began to burn, transforming the ice of grief into the hot steel of anger. A fury so pure and so profound, it momentarily silenced my sorrow. I saw it all with a sudden painful clarity. This wasn't just one selfish decision. This was the culmination of 1,000 small betrayals, a slow erosion of the values Lena and I had tried to instill in her. It was the result of her marriage to Kevin, a man who saw family not as a source of love and support, but as another asset to be leveraged. I'll see what I can do, Dad, she said finally, her tone dismissive, a final hollow promise she had no intention of keeping. I have to go. Kevin's calling me on the other line. I'll talk to you later. And with that, she hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just lowered the phone from my ear and stared at the smiling picture of my Lena. The silence rushed back in, but it was different now. It was no longer just empty. It was filled with resolve. My daughter had made her choice. She had chosen a party over her mother. Now it was my turn to make a choice. And I knew with absolute certainty that my choice would change her life forever. That phone call replayed in my mind, each word a fresh wound. But as the anger settled, it unearthed a deep, painful history. This wasn't a sudden break. It was the final crumbling of a foundation that had been cracking for years, ever since Kevin Miller walked into our lives. I remember the day Chloe brought him home like it was yesterday. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and Lena had spent the entire day cooking. She made her famous gumbo, the one Chloe used to say she could eat every day for the rest of her life. When Chloe walked in, her face was lit up with a kind of happiness I hadn't seen before. And next to her was Kevin. Tall, handsome in that clean-cut way, with a firm handshake and a smile that seemed to have been professionally polished. He was a financial advisor from Buckhead, he said, one of the wealthiest parts of Atlanta. He spoke of investments and portfolios with an easy confidence that impressed Lena, and I admit, even me. We saw a successful man, a white man who seemed to adore our daughter. We saw a secure future for her. We were so proud we were blind. The first crack appeared over dinner. Kevin looked into his bowl of gumbo, the rich, dark stew that held generations of our family's history, and he poked at it with his spoon. "It's very rustic," he said, the word hanging in the air like an insult. Lena's smile faltered for just a second. I saw the hurt in her eyes before she masked it. "It's an old family recipe," she said warmly, trying to bridge the gap. Chloe, who should have defended her mother's cooking, just laughed lightly. "Oh, Mom, Kevin's just used to five-star restaurants. His palate is a little more refined." Refined. That was the word she used. As if our food, our culture, was somehow crude. I watched my daughter, the girl who used to lick the gumbo bowl clean, now looking at it through a stranger's eyes, through Kevin's eyes. That night as we cleaned up, Lena was quiet. "He didn't like my cooking," she said softly, not as a question but as a statement of fact. I held her and told her the man was a fool with no taste, but we both knew something had shifted. Chloe was creating distance, putting up a wall between her new life and her old one. The small cracks began to multiply. Whenever they visited, Kevin would make subtle, dismissive comments. He called our neighborhood quaint, but his tone made it sound like run down. He'd look at the sturdy oak furniture I'd bought with the first big check from my construction company and say, "Have you ever considered something more minimalist?" Chloe would just smile and squeeze his arm, a silent signal of her allegiance. She was so caught up in the life he was offering her, the country club memberships, the European vacations, the designer clothes, that she couldn't see he was teaching her to be ashamed of where she came from. He was isolating her from us, one refined taste at a time, and she was letting him, eagerly. The first major tremor, the one that showed me the true nature of the man my daughter had married, came about a year later. We were all sitting in the backyard for a Sunday barbecue. It was a perfect Georgia day, the sun warming my face. Lena was showing Kevin the rose bushes she'd planted when Chloe was born. They were her pride and joy. I was grilling ribs, the smell of hickory smoke filling the air. It was a scene of perfect domestic peace. And then Kevin shattered it. He cleared his throat and looked at me with that slick, professional smile of his. "Elijah," he began. "Chloe and I were talking. We've been looking at your finances, and we think you and Lena are sitting on a gold mine with this house." I stopped turning the ribs. "What are you talking about, Kevin?" He gestured around the yard at the towering oak tree I planted the day Chloe took her first steps. "This property value has skyrocketed. You could sell this place cash out and move into a high-end retirement community. My firm actually manages a beautiful one just north of the city. Top-of-the-line amenities, 24-hour security, managed care. It would be a smart move, a way to secure your future." I looked at him, then at Chloe, who was nodding in agreement, a hopeful look on her face. They didn't see a home. They saw an asset. They saw a number on a spreadsheet. My voice was low and steady when I finally spoke. "This is not an asset, Kevin. This is our home." Lena planted every tree in this garden with her own 2 hands. We brought our daughter home from the hospital to this house. Every mark on the doorframe is a record of her growing up. You don't sell memories. I expected Chloe to understand. I expected her to jump in and say, "Of course, Daddy, he didn't mean it like that." But she didn't. She looked at me with frustration, her brow furrowed. "Dad, don't be so sentimental. Kevin is just talking about being practical. You're not getting any younger. This big house is a lot to maintain." Her words hit me harder than any insult from Kevin could have. Sentimental. She called me sentimental, as if a life's worth of love and labor was a foolish weakness. I turned off the grill. My appetite was gone. "The conversation is over," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "We will never sell this house." Kevin's smile tightened. He had lost, and he didn't like losing. But it was Chloe's reaction that truly broke my heart. Later, as they were leaving, she pulled me aside. "Why do you have to be so stubborn?" she whispered, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Kevin was just trying to help. You always have to be so difficult." Difficult. Because I wouldn't sell my soul for a profit. That was the day I realized the battle wasn't against Kevin. The battle was for my daughter's heart. And it was a battle I was beginning to fear I had already lost. After the argument about selling the house, the air between us grew thick with unspoken words. The visits from Chloe and Kevin became less frequent, more formal. They were brief, brittle affairs filled with polite, empty chatter that danced around the edges of the chasm that had opened up between us. The easy laughter that once filled our home was gone, replaced by a strained silence. I watched my daughter, and I saw a woman I was beginning not to recognize. She looked at her mother and me with a kind of polite pity, as if we were relics from a past she was trying to outrun. During this time, Kevin seemed to have dropped the subject of the house. But I've been in the construction business my whole life. I know that if you can't knock down a wall, you find another way in. And Kevin, I soon learned, was very good at looking for new doors. His new approach was subtler, more insidious. He stopped criticizing our home and started focusing on our money. My money. He would sit on our sofa sipping the sweet tea Lena offered him and talk casually about the stock market. He'd drop names of tech companies and use terms like aggressive growth portfolios and emerging market bonds. He was trying to sound impressive, to make me feel like the world of modern finance was a language I couldn't possibly understand. He was trying to make me feel old and out of touch. He wanted me to think that the money I had painstakingly earned over 45 years of hard labor and smart conservative decisions was somehow obsolete, wasting away in simple savings accounts and low-yield bonds. He was planting a seed of doubt, hoping it would grow into fear. And fear, as he knew, makes people do foolish things. The campaign of subtle hints escalated one Tuesday evening. Kevin called and said he and Chloe wanted to come over to discuss something important. "A family matter," he'd said, his voice laced with a manufactured seriousness. They arrived not with a bottle of wine or a bouquet of flowers for Lena, but with a sleek leather briefcase. Kevin placed it on our coffee table with a soft thud that echoed in the quiet living room. He opened it and took out a laptop and a stack of glossy brochures. This wasn't a family visit. This was a sales pitch. For the next hour, he presented a slideshow filled with charts and graphs I could barely read. He spoke about market volatility, about inflation, about the necessity of taking calculated risks to secure our legacy. The word made me want to laugh. He talked about legacy as if it were a number in a bank account, not the love and life we had built within those very walls. Finally, he got to the point. He had identified a unique investment opportunity, a high-risk, high-reward tech fund managed by his firm. It promised returns that sounded too good to be true. And as my father used to say, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. All I had to do, he said with a gleaming smile, was liquidate my entire life's savings and transfer it to him. He would handle the rest. He would make our money work for us. I let the silence hang in the air after he finished. I looked at the confident, predatory smile on his face. I looked at my daughter, who was watching me with an expectant, almost desperate expression. She had already bought into the fantasy he was selling. She saw a future of even greater wealth, a shortcut to the life she craved. She didn't see the danger. She didn't see the disrespect. I leaned forward, placing my hands on my knees. My hands are rough, calloused from decades of work. They are the hands of a man who built things, real things, not a man who shuffles numbers on a screen. "Kevin," I said, my voice calm and measured. "I appreciate the presentation. It was very colorful." I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "But let me tell you something. I started my construction business with a used pickup truck and $2,000 I'd saved from working 2 jobs. I built it from the ground up from nothing. I've managed payrolls, I've negotiated million-dollar contracts, and I've weathered 3 recessions. I know how to manage my money, and the first rule I ever learned is you don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially a basket you don't understand and can't see." I tapped one of his glossy brochures. "You're asking me to give you everything I've ever worked for, everything I've built, to protect my wife and my family, and trust it to a fund full of companies I've never heard of. I'm not going to do that. Kevin's professional mask slipped. The polished smile was gone, replaced by a tight, angry line. Elijah, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. With all due respect, the world has changed. You can't just let money sit in a savings account. That's not how wealth is built anymore. That is how my wealth was built, I countered, my voice hardening. It was built with sweat and caution, not with gambling. The room was thick with tension. Chloe jumped in her voice, pleading. Daddy Kevin's one of the best advisors in the city. He's just trying to help us, to help you. I looked at my daughter. Is he Chloe, or is he trying to help himself? The accusation hung in the air, undeniable. Kevin snapped his laptop shut and began packing his briefcase with sharp, angry movements. He knew he had lost. His pride was wounded. The visit ended moments later with cold, clipped goodbyes at the door. I knew it wasn't over. I knew he would use my daughter as his weapon. And I was right. She came back 2 days later. Alone. The moment she walked in the door, I could see the storm in her eyes. She didn't even sit down. She stood in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed her body, rigid with anger. How could you? She started, her voice shaking. How could you embarrass Kevin like that? He comes here on his own time, trying to do something nice for you, trying to secure your future, and you treat him like a criminal. I remained seated. I treated him like a salesman, Chloe, which is exactly what he was. He's not a salesman, he's my husband. He's family. She yelled the word family, sounding like an accusation. Why do you always have to be so suspicious? Why do you always think someone is trying to scam you? He was just trying to help. I rose from my chair slowly and stood before her, my heart aching for the beautiful, trusting girl she used to be. The girl who had been replaced by this angry, defensive woman. I looked her straight in the eye. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of my 71 years. Family doesn't look at each other's checkbooks before they look into each other's eyes, Chloe, I said. For the last 2 years, your husband has shown more interest in my financial statements than in my life. He's shown more concern for my portfolio than for your mother's health. Trust is earned, my girl. It's not a right of marriage. He hasn't earned mine. She stared at me, speechless for a moment, her anger momentarily replaced by shock. But the wall Kevin had built around her was too high, too thick. Her anger returned a shield to protect her from the truth. I can't believe this, she whispered, shaking her head. You're impossible. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, a definitive, final sound. The visits didn't just become less frequent after that. They stopped. The chasm between us had become a canyon, and I was standing on one side watching my daughter disappear into the distance on the other. The silence that followed Chloe slamming the door was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a settled home. It was the dead quiet of a wound, a silence that festers. For a while, life continued on the surface. Lena and I fell back into our rhythm, a dance of 50 years that needed no words. We tended the garden, we read on the porch, we watched old movies. We pretended that the chasm that had opened up with our daughter wasn't there. We didn't talk about it. The pain was too great, and Lena, I could see, was holding on to the hope that Chloe would come around. She believed in the goodness of her daughter's heart, even as I was beginning to believe that heart was no longer her own. And then the world shifted beneath our feet. The doctor's office was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of bleach. The words came at us wrapped in medical jargon phrases like metastatic carcinoma and treatment protocols. But they all boiled down to one terrifying word: cancer. It was a word that sucked all the air out of the room. I felt Lena's hand go limp in mine. I looked at her, at the woman who had been my rock, my everything, and for the first time in 50 years, I saw fear in her eyes. A deep, profound fear that mirrored my own. In that moment, the world shrank to just the two of us. All the anger I felt towards Chloe, all the frustration with Kevin, it all evaporated. None of it mattered. All that mattered was the woman sitting next to me. I squeezed her hand and said the only thing I could. We'll fight this. Together. When we got home, I made the call to Chloe. Her initial reaction was what you'd expect. There was a sharp intake of breath, a flurry of questions, and a cascade of promises. Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. We'll be there. We'll do anything. Whatever you need, just tell us. We'll drop everything. I held on to those words. I wanted to believe them. Lena needed to believe them. For a week, it seemed like the old Chloe was back. She came to the first oncologist appointment. She brought groceries. She sat with Lena and held her hand. Kevin even managed to look concerned, but it was a performance, and the show had a very short run. As the reality of the illness set in, so did their excuses. The treatment was grueling. Lena was often sick, tired, and in pain. She needed support. She needed her daughter. But Chloe's visits became shorter, her calls less frequent. The excuses started as a trickle, and soon became a flood. The first time Lena had a bad reaction to the chemo, I called Chloe, my voice tight with worry. "We were just about to come over," she said, her voice rushed. "But Kevin just got called into a last-minute meeting. It's with the partners from the New York office. He can't miss it. I have to be there with him. We'll try for tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. A few weeks later, Lena was feeling a little stronger and was looking forward to a Sunday visit. Chloe called that morning. "Dad, I feel terrible about this, but our neighbors invited us to their lake house for the weekend. We've been trying to get in with this crowd for ages. It's really important for our social standing. You understand, don't you?" I didn't understand. I didn't understand how a lake house could be more important than your mother. But I just said, "Okay, Chloe, your mother will be disappointed." Her response was a quick, "Tell her I'll bring her something nice." The most unbelievable excuse came a few months into the treatment. Lena was scheduled for a particularly difficult round of chemotherapy and would need to be in the hospital for a few days. We had told Chloe about it weeks in advance. The day before she was admitted, Chloe called. "So I know the timing is awful," she began. "But Kevin and I have that trip to Italy booked. We did it almost a year ago. Everything is non-refundable. We would lose thousands of dollars if we canceled now. And honestly, with all the stress lately, we really need a break to recharge." I was stunned into silence. My wife was fighting for her life, and my daughter was complaining about losing a deposit on a trip to Tuscany. She needed to recharge. I looked over at Lena, who was asleep on the sofa looking so small and frail. "You go on your trip, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You go and recharge." I hung up the phone before she could hear the contempt in my voice. They went to Italy. They posted pictures on social media. Chloe smiling in front of the Colosseum. Kevin raising a glass of wine at a vineyard. And all the while, my Lena was in a sterile hospital bed fighting a war inside her own body. The final unforgivable blow came about 6 months later. The cancer had spread. The doctors recommended a new, more aggressive form of chemotherapy. The side effects were brutal. Lena was in the hospital weaker than I had ever seen her. She could barely eat. She could barely speak above a whisper. But every time she opened her eyes, she would ask the same question. "Is Chloe coming today?" Her daughter was all she wanted. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I called Chloe, and for once I let the desperation into my voice. I didn't yell. I pleaded. "Baby girl," I said, using the name I hadn't called her in years. "Your mother is asking for you. She's very weak. She needs you. Please, just come for an hour. Whatever you have planned, just cancel it, please." I heard her hesitate. Maybe I thought maybe this was it. Maybe the gravity of the situation had finally broken through the wall of selfishness. "Okay, Daddy," she said softly. "I'll be there tomorrow afternoon, I promise." That promise was a lifeline. I told Lena, and a small, hopeful light returned to her eyes. The next day was agony. Every time the door to her room opened, Lena's head would turn with a painful slowness, her face filled with anticipation only to fall again when it was just a nurse. I watched the clock on the wall, each tick a testament to our vigil. Afternoon bled into evening. I kept telling her, "She's probably just stuck in traffic, sweetie." But I knew. Deep down I knew. At 6 o'clock, my phone finally rang. It was Chloe. I stepped into the hallway to answer it. Before I could even say hello, her voice loud and fizzing with excitement burst through the speaker. "Dad, oh my God, you are not going to believe what just happened. Kevin got it. He got the promotion. Senior vice president. His boss just called him. We're all going out to that fancy steakhouse downtown to celebrate tonight. I'm so proud of him." The world stopped. I could hear the clatter of hospital carts, the distant chime of a call button, but it all sounded like it was coming from underwater. My daughter was celebrating a job title while my wife was fading away in a room down the hall. My voice was a dead, flat whisper. "What about your mother, Chloe?" Her excitement didn't even dip. "Oh, right, gosh, I'm so sorry. With all this excitement, I completely forgot. I can't make it to the hospital now, obviously. This dinner is a command performance. Just tell Mom congratulations for us, will you? And tell her I love her and I'll try to come by this weekend." Try. She would try. I hung up the phone without another word. I stood in that sterile hallway for a long time, my hand resting on the cool wall, steadying myself. I had to compose my face. I had to erase the rage and the heartbreak. I had to go back into that room and lie to the love of my life. I walked back in and sat by her bed. She looked at me, her eyes full of questions. "Was that Chloe?" she whispered. I took her hand. It felt as fragile as a bird's wing. "Yes, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "She sends all her love. She got tied up in a huge last-minute project at work. A real emergency. You know how dedicated she is. She's so sorry, but she'll be here just as soon as she can." Lena looked at me, her gaze searching my face. She knew. A mother always knows. She tried to smile back, a faint, heartbreaking curve of her lips. "Of course," she whispered. "She's a busy girl. My busy, successful girl." But the light in her eyes dimmed. The flicker of hope was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness that I knew mirrored my own. In that moment, watching the profound disappointment settle over my wife's face, I knew with a certainty that was as cold and hard as steel that my daughter was gone. The person on the other end of that phone was a stranger who had chosen promotions and parties over family and love. I sat there all night, holding Lena's hand, listening to the steady beep of the machines that were keeping her alive. I was grieving for two people that night: my wife, who was slowly leaving this world, and my daughter, who was already gone. I hung up the phone after Chloe's birthday party excuse, and the memories of the past few years rushed back, not as a hazy fog of sadness, but as a series of sharp, clear exhibits in a case against her. The disrespect over the gumbo, the attempt to sell our home, the pressure to hand over my life savings, the chilling indifference to her mother's suffering. It was a pattern, a long, slow, calculated campaign of selfishness, orchestrated by her husband and executed by my daughter. That final phone call wasn't an isolated incident. It was a verdict. It was the moment the jury came back and declared her guilty of a crime worse than greed, the crime of a hollow heart. My grief for Lena was still a raw, open wound, but now a new feeling was crystallizing within me. It was a cold, hard anger, an anger as solid and unyielding as the steel I used to build skyscrapers. The passive sorrow of a victim was gone, replaced by the focused resolve of a man with a final necessary job to do. I was no longer just a grieving husband. I was the sworn protector of my wife's legacy, and I would not fail her in death as I had failed to protect her from the slow-burning pain of her daughter's neglect in life. I stood up from Lena's armchair, my joints protesting but my purpose straightening my spine. I walked over to the old roll-top desk in the corner, the one where Lena kept her address book and paid the bills. My hand was steady as I picked up the phone again. This time, I didn't call my daughter. I called my lawyer. Marcus Thorne has been more than my lawyer for 40 years. He's been my friend. We came up together, two young black men trying to make our way in a world that wasn't always eager to let us in. He understood the value of hard work and the meaning of a legacy. His voice was full of genuine sorrow when he answered. "Elijah, my friend, I was so sorry to hear about Lena. My heart is with you." "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice devoid of the emotion I knew he expected. "I need to see you. Right now. We need to change the will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Elijah," he said gently, "are you sure now is the right time? You're grieving. You shouldn't make any rash decisions." "This isn't a rash decision, Marcus," I replied, my tone leaving no room for debate. "This is the clearest decision I've made in 10 years. I'll be at your office in 30 minutes. The drive to Marcus's office was a blur. My mind was a whirlwind of planning, of strategy. When I sat down in the familiar leather chair opposite his mahogany desk, I didn't waste any time. "I want Chloe out," I said bluntly. "And Kevin. I want them removed from the will, completely." Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers. He had the patient, thoughtful face of a man used to dealing with high emotions. "I can do that, Elijah. It's simple enough. But I have to ask you to think about this. She's your only child." "She stopped being my child the moment she chose a birthday party over her mother's funeral." I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "But I don't want to just cut her out. That's too easy. It's too clean. She'll just think I'm a bitter old man who acted out of anger. She'll tell herself a story where she's the victim and she'll move on with her life, her and that leech she married. I leaned forward, my hands flat on his desk. I don't want her to move on, not yet. I want her to understand. I want her to feel the weight of what she threw away. I want her to be forced to look at the true legacy of her mother, the legacy she spat on. Marcus listened, his sharp eyes studying my face. He saw that this wasn't just about anger, it was about justice. A very specific, very personal kind of justice. "What are you proposing, Elijah?" he asked. And that's when the plan began to take shape, piece by painful piece. We talked for over 2 hours. At first, my ideas were raw, fueled by rage, but Marcus, with his calm, logical mind, helped me refine them. He helped me turn my raw anger into a precision instrument. The goal was not just to punish, but to illuminate. We would attack the two things Chloe and Kevin valued above all else, their money and their public image. I wouldn't just disinherit her, I would redirect the inheritance. I would take the $5 million they were so eagerly waiting for, and I would turn it into a monument to everything Lena stood for and everything they had rejected. First, I said, the idea forming in my mind with a beautiful, terrible clarity, the bulk of the money, everything they thought would be theirs, will go to the hospice. The very place where Lena spent her last days, cared for by nurses who showed her more compassion than her own daughter did. We will donate it in her name, a massive publicly announced donation. I want a plaque on the wall, the Lena Vance Memorial Wing. I want them to have to drive past that building and see her name, knowing it was built with their inheritance. Marcus nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. That's a powerful statement, Elijah. I'm not finished, I said. Lena was a history teacher. She believed in education. She believed in giving a hand up to kids from our old neighborhood, kids who had the brains, but not the money. So we're going to create something else. The Lena Vance Scholarship Fund. It will provide full-ride 4-year scholarships to university for underprivileged African-American students from our community. Her legacy won't be a new sports car for Kevin or a bigger house for Chloe. Her legacy will be doctors and lawyers and engineers who came from nothing just like I did. A legacy of hope, not greed. Now Marcus was truly smiling. And how, he asked, do you plan on delivering this news? My own smile was grim. That's the final piece. I'm going to wait. I'm going to let them think they're safe. They'll come crawling back after the funeral full of fake apologies trying to secure their position. And I'm going to let them. And then when the time is right, I'm going to deliver the news myself. I thought for a moment, and then the perfect poetic justice of it all hit me. Chloe told me she couldn't come to her mother's funeral because of Kevin's birthday party. The party he just had to have for his career. I think that would be the perfect venue, in front of all his important friends and business partners. I'll give him a birthday present he will never ever forget. Marcus looked at me, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. Elijah, that's brutal. No, Marcus, I said, standing up, feeling lighter than I had in months. It's not brutal. It's precise. It's earned. It's what Lena deserves. Her memory won't be a footnote in their greedy lives. It will be the headline, and I will write it myself. The funeral was a quiet, dignified affair. Our church was filled with people whose lives Lena had touched. Old students, fellow teachers, neighbors, family. Everyone was there except the one person who should have been in the front pew next to me. Chloe didn't come. Instead, she sent a wreath of white lilies so large and ostentatious, it felt more like an advertisement for a florist than a tribute to a mother. It was a hollow, expensive gesture that perfectly summarized the woman my daughter had become. For 3 weeks after we laid my Lena to rest, there was silence. I knew they were giving me space, letting me grieve, but I also knew it was a calculated move. They were waiting for the right moment to reestablish contact to ensure the lines of inheritance were still secure. The call came on a Tuesday. Her name flashed on my phone and I felt a cold calm settle over me. Daddy. Her voice was like warm honey, a sweet, sticky performance of concern. I've been so worried about you. I wanted to give you some space, but I miss you. We miss you. I played my part. I'm getting by, sweetheart. Well, she continued, her voice brightening, Kevin and I thought what you really need is to get out of the house, to be around family. You know his birthday is this Saturday and we're having a big party at the club. We want you to be the guest of honor. It would mean the world to us if you came. There it was. The invitation. an olive branch not of peace but of greed, a way to parade their forgiving nature in front of their friends while ensuring the old man and his money were still in their grasp. This was my moment, the opening I had been waiting for. "Of course, Chloe," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I wouldn't miss it. In fact, I have a very special birthday gift for Kevin that I'd like to give him." I could almost hear the sigh of relief on the other end of the line, the sound of a trap snapping shut on the trappers themselves. "Oh, Daddy, that's wonderful. He'll be so thrilled," she chirped. "Oh, he'll be something I thought, but it won't be thrilled." The night of the party, I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one Lena always said made me look distinguished. I drove to the Northwood Country Club, a place of sprawling green lawns and hushed old money. As I gave my car to the valet, I could hear the sound of forced laughter and clinking champagne glasses drifting from the grand ballroom. This was their world, a world built on surfaces, on appearances, on who you knew and what you owned. Walking in, I felt like a ghost from another time. Chloe and Kevin spotted me immediately and rushed over their faces masks of loving concern. "Daddy, you made it," Chloe said, kissing the air next to my cheek. Kevin clapped me on the shoulder with a familiarity he hadn't earned. "Elijah, so good to see you. You're looking sharp." For the next hour, they paraded me around the room like a prize bull. To a real estate developer, they said, "This is my father, Elijah Vance. You know Vance Construction." To a city councilman, "You've met my father-in-law, haven't you?" A true Atlanta success story. They weren't introducing their father. They were presenting an asset, a testament to their own good breeding. I smiled. I shook hands, and with every introduction I saw the same look in people's eyes. A flicker of interest that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with my perceived net worth. This, I realized, was the altar upon which my daughter had sacrificed her soul. Finally, the time came. The band quieted down and Kevin stepped up to a small podium, a microphone in his hand. He thanked everyone for coming, made a few stale jokes, and then he smiled in my direction. "And now I'd like to invite a very special man to say a few words. My father-in-law, Elijah Vance." A polite round of applause followed me as I walked to the podium. Chloe was beaming at me, her eyes shining with pride. She thought this was her victory lap. I took the microphone, my hand steady. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces, the diamonds and the designer dresses, and I began. "Thank you, Kevin. It's an honor to be here to celebrate your birthday." I started softly, my voice filled with a warmth that was entirely genuine, for it was born from my love for the daughter I once had. When a man gets to be my age, he spends a lot of time thinking about family. I remember when Chloe was just a little girl. I'd come home from a long day on a construction site covered in dust, and she'd run into my arms without a second thought. I saw Chloe's eyes glisten with tears. She was enjoying the show. You watch your children grow. You give them everything you can, and you hope you've raised them right. You hope they find a partner who makes them happy. And seeing Chloe so happy with you, Kevin, has brought an old man a lot of peace. They were lapping it up. The entire room was smiling, nodding. It was the perfect, heartwarming speech. I paused. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch. And then my voice changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by cold, hard steel. But real love, true family isn't measured in expensive parties and public speeches. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Chloe's smile faltered. It's measured by who shows up when the lights go out. It's measured in the quiet moments, in the sterile silence of a hospital room in the middle of the night. I locked eyes with my daughter and I did not look away. For the last year of her life, my wife Lena fought a terrible battle with cancer. She was brave and she was dignified. But she was also scared, and she was lonely. She spent countless hours in a hospital bed hoping to see the face of her only child. Chloe's face had gone pale. Kevin's hand, which had been resting on her back, now gripped her arm. "I know many of you here tonight are very busy people," I continued, my voice growing stronger, resonating through the suddenly silent ballroom. "You have important meetings, business trips, social engagements. I understand that. My daughter, she had something very important too. When her mother passed away when the funeral was scheduled, she told me she couldn't make it." I let the words hang in the air, a collective gasp echoing in the room. She couldn't come to her own mother's funeral because it conflicted with this very party, her husband's birthday, A party she told me was, and I quote, too important for his career to miss. The color drained completely from Chloe's face. Kevin looked like he had been struck by lightning. My wife gave our daughter the gift of life, I said, my voice thick with a grief that was still raw. And when she lay dying, when all she wanted was the comfort of her child's presence, that child was busy tasting cakes and choosing champagne for a party. She abandoned her mother in her darkest hour for a night of networking. I looked away from them and towards the back of the room where my friend Marcus was standing. I gave him a slight nod. He began walking forward, carrying a large, elegantly wrapped gift box. The entire room turned to watch him. I turned back to Kevin. But a promise is a promise. I told you I had a special gift for you, Kevin, and here it is, a gift that you and my daughter have so profoundly earned. Marcus placed the box on a table in front of the podium. My daughter was openly sobbing now, her whole body shaking. Kevin stared at the box as if it were a bomb. Go on, I urged. Open it. It's for you. With trembling hands, he fumbled with the ribbon and tore off the paper. He lifted the lid. The crowd craned their necks to see. But there was no watch, no keys to a new car, no checkbook. There was only a single, beautifully framed document. I took the microphone for the last time. My voice was no longer angry. It was the voice of judgment, calm and absolute. You see, I announced, my voice booming through the speakers. In the weeks since my wife's passing, I have been restructuring my estate. The inheritance you both were so patiently waiting for. I liquidated the primary assets, that $5 million you were so keen on helping me invest, Kevin. I pointed to the frame in his hands. That is a certificate of donation. I have donated the entire $5 million in my wife's name to the Northside Hospice, the wonderful facility where Lena spent her final days surrounded by nurses who showed her more grace and compassion than her own flesh and blood ever did. The money will be used to build a new wing, the Lena Vance Memorial Wing, so they can provide comfort to other families, to real families who sit by the bedsides of those they love. A wave of shock rolled through the audience, but I wasn't finished. And that's not all, I said, my voice ringing with a power they had never heard from me before. I have also used my remaining funds to establish the Lena Vance Scholarship Fund. It will provide full 4-year university scholarships to underprivileged African-American students from the neighborhood where Lena and I grew up. Her legacy will not be a bigger house in Buckhead or a new portfolio of stocks. Her legacy will be generations of doctors, teachers, and leaders who will build a better world. Her legacy will live on through them, not through those who abandoned her. I placed the microphone gently back on the stand. I looked one last time at the wreckage of their faces. At my daughter, whose tears were not for her mother, but for her lost fortune. At her husband, whose public humiliation was a portrait of pure, impotent rage. I had said everything that needed to be said. Without another glance, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving them to the judgment of the silent, staring crowd and the deafening echo of their own greed. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I didn't need to. As I walked through the ornate doors of the country club and into the cool night air, I could feel the shockwaves ripple behind me. I could imagine the frantic whispers, the sideways glances, the hurried exits of guests, not wanting to be associated with the spectacular implosion of the Miller family's reputation. The story of that night would spread through their elite circles like wildfire, a delicious piece of gossip about the greedy son-in-law and the heartless daughter who were publicly disinherited in the most dramatic way possible. Kevin's career, built on a carefully constructed image of success and trustworthiness, was ruined. Who would trust their money to a man so publicly exposed as a shameless, grasping parasite? His ambition had been his god, and I had simply shown his fellow worshippers that their god had feet of clay. I didn't do it for them, though. I did it for Lena. In the days that followed, I found a new kind of peace. The heavy, oppressive silence in the house was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness that felt respectful, even sacred. I spent my time in Lena's garden, pulling weeds and tending to her roses. I found myself talking to her, telling her about my day, about the progress of the scholarship fund, about the plans for her memorial wing at the hospice. And in the rustle of the leaves and the warmth of the sun on my back, I felt her presence. I felt her approval. I didn't hear from Chloe, not a call, not a text, not a single word. I knew she wouldn't reach out with an apology. Her pride and Kevin's rage would never allow that. She was likely clinging to one last desperate hope, the hope that my public declaration was just a threat, a cruel lesson, that in the end the legal documents, the will itself, would remain unchanged. that she was still my daughter, and blood in the end would be thicker than water. It was a hope I had instructed Marcus to extinguish with final legal precision. About a week after the party, a registered letter from Marcus Thorne's law firm arrived at Chloe and Kevin's perfectly manicured doorstep. I wasn't there to see her open it, but I could picture the scene with perfect clarity. I imagine her hands trembling, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and that stubborn, foolish hope. The letter was short, formal, and utterly brutal in its clarity. It legally informed her that the last will and testament of Elijah Vance had been officially amended. It detailed in cold legal language the establishment of the Lena Vance Memorial Wing and the Lena Vance Scholarship Fund as the sole beneficiaries of the $5 million trust. But it contained one final piece of information, one last twist of the knife I had saved just for her. The letter stated that upon my death, our family home, the house she grew up in, the house she had tried to convince me to sell, along with any remaining personal assets, would not go to her. It too would be sold, with all proceeds being transferred directly into the scholarship fund. She was left with nothing. Not a dollar, not a keepsake, not a single brick from the foundation of the life her mother and I had built. The letter was not an act of anger, it was an act of severance, a legal confirmation of a spiritual truth. She was no longer a part of our family's story. A few days later, on a bright, clear morning, I drove to the cemetery. I brought with me a large bouquet of white stargazer lilies, Lena's favorite. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. I found her headstone, a simple, elegant piece of granite that read, "Lena Vance, beloved wife and teacher, her legacy is love." I knelt down, my old knees cracking in protest, and carefully arranged the flowers. I traced the letters of her name with my rough fingertips. I stayed there for a long time, not saying anything at first, just feeling the peace of the place, feeling close to her. Finally, I began to speak my voice, a low murmur in the quiet air. "Well, my love," I said, "it's done." I told her everything. I told her about the party, about the looks on their faces. I told her about the donation and the scholarships that would bear her name. I didn't speak with triumph or glee. I spoke with a deep, profound sadness and a quiet, unshakable sense of rightness. "I did the right thing, Lena," I whispered to the cool stone. "I know I did. Your legacy was never about money. It was about love and kindness and the belief that every child deserves a chance to shine. It was about the sacrifices you made, the lives you touched as a teacher, the goodness you put out into the world. That legacy is safe now. It will grow, it will flourish, it will help generations of young people find their way. It will live on bright and immortal long after we are all gone." I took a deep breath, the air feeling clean and fresh in my lungs for the first time in a long time. "As for me," I continued, "I can finally let you go in peace. I have honored you, my love. I have protected you." I stood up slowly, the sun warming my back. I had lost a daughter, but I had saved the soul of our family. I had defended the honor and the memory of the only woman I ever loved. And in the quiet stillness of that cemetery, I knew it was a victory. A true and final victory. I turned and walked away, not looking back, the golden light of the Atlanta afternoon resting on my shoulders like a comforting hand. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about the true meaning of family and the corrosive nature of greed. It shows that when we mistake monetary inheritance for love, we lose sight of our own humanity. Elijah's journey was not one of simple revenge, but of profound justice. He reclaimed his wife's memory from the shadow of neglect and redefined his legacy as one of compassion, generosity, and community. The ultimate lesson is that true wealth is not the money we leave behind, but the love we share and the respect we earn, especially in life's most difficult moments. What do you believe makes a true family legacy? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below.